As Ethan and Ingrid's 2024 big year continues, our week 3 trip to the Sax-Zim Bog is in the books. It will be a week that we will always remember for breathtaking birds, incredible cold, and some of the worst airline travel that we have ever experienced. Our destination was the famous Sax-Zim Bog in upstate Minnesota. The bog encompasses 300 square miles of spruce, alder, and tamarack forest, wet, spongy, poorly drained areas, neighboring farm fields, and a few hardy homesteaders. In the winter, temperatures regularly hover below zero, and we experienced wind chills far below that during our entire visit. The Sax-Zim Bog is also one of America's premier birding locations, where Canada's vast boreal forests, think spruce, reach down into the USA, providing access to species that are difficult to find in the lower 48 states. The primary attraction is owls, namely the iconic great gray owl and the northern hawk owl. As Ethan and I travel across the country for our lower 48 state big year, we have tried to avoid hiring guides whenever possible, as using guides is akin, in the opinions of some, to corked bats and steroids. But we made an exception to this rule for the Sax-Zim Bog. It's too vast, too cold, the roads can be challenging, and the birds are very spread out. After doing our research, we hired Jud Brink, a man with years of experience in the bog. He was very excited to help us with our big year and was a gem of a find for us. As our journey began, we took a flight from Portland, Maine to Minneapolis. When we arrived at our layover spot in Chicago, we were off to a good start. But things quickly went south as we waited for our connecting flight to Minneapolis. The gate of our flight was changed 4 times. The expected 8:30 p.m. departure time was changed to 9 p.m., then 9:45, then 10:05, then 11 p.m., then at 11:30 the flight was canceled.
So yesterday we got on a plane in Portland, got to O'Hare okay, but we never got out of O'Hare until we rented this car, because our flight yesterday from there to Minneapolis got canceled very late last night. We found a hotel, barely, fell into bed at about 1:30 a.m., got back up 6 o'clock next morning, back to the airport, and the flight we were booked on for 10 o'clock this morning continued to be delayed, so we had no confidence we were going to get there today. So we took matters into our own hands, got this little VW Jetta from Avis, and we're on our way, driving ourselves north. Oh, the music you might hear in the background is us on hold with United Airlines, waiting yet again to figure out getting home. But better to be on the move and sitting in the car waiting for them than to be sitting in an airport full of people not knowing what was going to happen next. So, all in all, an eventful start to the first big trip of our big year. But hey, we're doing it. We're going to get there, and we are going to earn those owls. Gosh darn it.
We arrived at the Sax-Zim Bog about 9 p.m. that evening and were delighted by the warm and cozy lodge, all chaise accommodations, where we were staying. The common area, complete with a roaring fire, was shared by other birders and wildlife photographers. We enjoyed hearing their stories, but were concerned that several were heading home in the morning, having failed to see the great gray owl, the whole reason we were here. Morning arrived and the temperature was negative 14 Fahrenheit, and factoring the wind, it was like 33 below. We walked Alshez grounds and soon observed a flock of red crossbills on a bird feeder, only about 20 feet away. These were our first crossbills of the season, and we were thrilled to see them so close. We took this as a good omen. Later, we learned that this was only the second time that red crossbills had ever been seen at the lodge. Soon, Judd, our guide, arrived, and we set off across the snow-packed roads of the bog in search of birds. Our first sighting of the day was a northern hawk owl. Given its name because it looks like a hawk in flight, this bird seems to have a real attitude. It seems to glare at you with an angry look. Feeding on small rodents which it hunts by sight and sound, it likes to perch on top of trees looking for prey. Jud kept us busy until well after dark, scanning the roadside for the elusive great gray owl while adding bird after bird to our year list. One of the remarkable things about the Sax-Zim Bog are the elaborate private feeding stations that homeowners set up near the road. Visitors are invited to stop and watch the feeders as birds come in. Jud has his own somewhat secretive feeding station hidden in the woods, where we stopped for over an hour and added 3 more birds to our year list. Ethan and I were both frozen through despite wearing multiple layers of winter clothing. Our guide, on the other hand, was wearing a light jacket and seemed oblivious to the cold. As darkness began to fall, we drove up and down the road, combing the trees for the great gray to no avail. But we were treated to a dozen or so ruffed grouse, high in birch trees, feeding on catkins, a birch tree flower, as they came in to roost for the night. We returned to the lodge, excited from a successful day, but concerned that we only had one more day to find the great gray owl. Morning arrived quickly, and Jud, Ethan, and I piled back into Jud's Subaru Outback, and once again began to scan the trees for a gray watermelon with a white bow tie, as Jud aptly describes the great gray.
At exactly 7:41, we got a message that said, "Great Gray Owl on Admiral Road, just south of the feeders."
I read the message to Jud, and suddenly we were moving down the bog's icy, snow-packed roads at what could only be conservatively called breakneck speed. 20 minutes later, we saw a number of cars by the side of the road, and the silhouette of a gray watermelon was sitting at the top of a spruce tree. We had at last sighted a great gray owl. We crept as close as we dared to the bird and watched it for about 30 minutes until it flew off. Ethan stoically tried not to cry, as the tears would have frozen to his face. Back in 2017, Ethan was away on a business trip when I had the opportunity to see a great gray on one of its rare visits to the state of Maine. But I was sure thrilled to see this charismatic, magical creature again. There really is nothing quite like it. The rest of the day was spent trying to find long-shot woodpeckers and getting better looks at some of our earlier sightings. Our trip home was another United Airlines fiasco with canceled flights, cab rides through New York City at rush hour, and long rental car drives. But we got home, exhausted but happy. During our 4-day trip to Minnesota, we added 15 new birds to our year list. When we get to Florida and Texas in February, we expect to add that many birds to our list every single day. But the birds of Sax-Zim Bog are hard to get winter birds that can't be ignored. Thanks to Jud's expert help, we went home having found more of our target birds than we had expected and had a lot of fun along the way. If you ever find yourself visiting the bog, be sure to stop in at the Wilbert Cafe for their all-day breakfast or lunch, a mug of warming hot chocolate, and perhaps a piece of lifer pie. On Friday, we were both tired from our adventure in Minnesota. So we slept late and then didn't go birding until mid-afternoon. On Saturday, we visited Biddeford Pool in Maine to get a rare male king eider, then traveled on to a water treatment plant in Saco to see a Wilson's warbler that has been living above one of the tanks. Evidently, he is using the heat to survive the cold Maine winter. A Wilson's warbler should be in Mexico or Central America right now. You can follow Ethan and my 2024 Big Year across the continental United States by visiting bigyearbirding.com. Happy birding!